On the evening of February 13, 2000, the small town of Shelby, North Carolina, settled into an ordinary Sunday night. The air carried the sharp bite of winter, and a steady rain had left the roads slick with patches of mud and glistening pavement. It was the kind of night when most families stayed indoors, the hum of televisions and the comfort of warm dinners wrapping around them like a blanket. Inside one modest home on Oakcrest Drive, the Degree family mirrored that rhythm. Harold and Aquila Degree were raising their two children with firm boundaries and deep love. Their daughter, Asha Degree, was just 9 years old, bright, shy, and fiercely independent for her age. Unlike many children, Asha wasn't interested in wandering far from home or testing limits. She was careful, cautious, and deeply rooted in her family's world. That weekend had been special. February 14th, Valentine's Day was approaching, and Asha had spent much of Sunday playing with her older brother, O'Brien, and enjoying the quiet security of home. Earlier in the day, the children had attended church, where Asha took part in the youth choir. Those who saw her remembered her wide smile, her neat braids, and the way she carried herself with a mix of innocence and determination beyond her years. By nightfall, the Degree household felt still. Asha had packed away her schoolbooks, ready for the week ahead, and gone to bed early. To her parents, it was an ordinary evening. Nothing that hinted at the storm that was about to break over their lives. But at some point, as the town lay under the cover of darkness, Asha made a decision no one could explain. While her family slept, she quietly slipped out of bed, gathered a few belongings into her backpack, and stepped into the night. The weather was brutal. Heavy rain lashed against the ground, and the temperature hovered just above freezing. Visibility was poor, and the country roads beyond her neighborhood were pitch black, save for the occasional sweep of headlights cutting through the storm. And yet, out there on Highway 18, just after 4 a.m., multiple drivers reported a startling sight. A small girl, alone, walking along the shoulder of the road, dressed in a white long-sleeved shirt and white pants. Some slowed, concerned, but she hurried into the darkness. Others thought they must be imagining things. It would be the last confirmed sighting of Asha Degree alive. By the time Valentine's Day morning arrived, her bed was empty, her backpack gone, and her family's world shattered. What had possessed a careful, cautious child to walk into the storm that night? Where had she been heading? And most haunting of all, who might have been waiting for her out there in the dark? The disappearance of Asha Degree would become one of the most baffling cases in North Carolina's history, pulling at the edges of every assumption, every certainty, and leaving behind a trail of questions that remain unanswered to this day. In the days leading up to Asha's disappearance, there was nothing outwardly unusual about the 9-year-old's life. She was a 4th-grade student at Falston Elementary School, bright, quiet, and athletic. Teachers remembered her as diligent, always turning in her homework neatly, always respectful. At home, her parents, Aquila and Harold, maintained a strict but loving household. Unlike many children her age, Asha wasn't allowed to wander the neighborhood freely. Her world was tightly circumscribed: school, church, basketball practice, and home. Her parents worked hard to shield her and her older brother from the dangers that often lurked outside. The Degrees didn't have internet in their home, and cable television was limited. To most, it might have seemed like a picture of safety and structure, which is why what happened next was so baffling, because it seemed to begin without warning, without a traceable cause. On the night of February 13, 2000, Asha and her brother attended basketball practice. The day had been stressful. Her team had lost a game, and she was upset about missing some key shots. Family members later recalled that she seemed particularly bothered by the loss. But by the time she went to bed that evening, everything seemed normal. Then, in the early hours of February 14th, a series of small, almost unremarkable events began to unfold inside the Degree household. The power briefly went out due to a nearby car accident, plunging the house into darkness. By 12:30 a.m., the lights had returned. At that point, Harold checked on both of his children. They were safe, asleep in their beds. But sometime between 2:30 and 3:15 a.m., Asha quietly got out of bed, put on her backpack, which she had packed with clothes and personal items, and slipped out of the house. There was no sound of a door creaking, no cries for help, no confrontation. She simply vanished into the cold, rainy night. The decision was chilling not just because of her age, but because of how deliberate it appeared to be. Asha wasn't a child wandering sleepily from her room. She had left with intent. And as the minutes ticked into hours, the Degree family's world was about to collapse into a nightmare they could never have imagined. By dawn on February 14, 2000, the Degree household was stirring awake. It was Valentine's Day, a Monday morning like any other. Aquila Degree went to her children's rooms to wake them for school. Her son was in bed, but Asha's bed was empty. At first, Aquila thought perhaps Asha had gotten up early, maybe already dressed for school. But her clothes weren't laid out. The bathroom was empty. She checked again, her daughter wasn't there. Panic rose quickly. The backpack Asha normally used for school was missing. The Degrees were not a family prone to delay. By 6:30 a.m., they called the police. Within minutes, officers from the Cleveland County Sheriff's Office arrived. A 9-year-old child missing from her bed overnight was nothing less than an emergency. As news spread, the community responded with urgency. Neighbors, church members, and friends joined law enforcement in a desperate search. Officers brought in K-9 units, helicopters, and roadblocks. The hunt for Asha began immediately. Then, troubling reports began to surface. Several motorists had seen a small figure walking along Highway 18 in the pre-dawn hours. Between 3:30 and 4:15 a.m., multiple drivers had spotted a young African-American girl, dressed in a long-sleeved shirt and white pants, trudging along the rain-slicked roadside. One witness even recalled circling back, thinking it was too strange to see a child walking alone at that hour in such weather. But when they turned, the girl darted off the road and disappeared into the darkness, as if hiding. That girl was Asha Degree. For investigators, the sightings were critical. They proved she had left her home voluntarily and was still alive in those early morning hours. But they also raised haunting questions. Where was she going? Who, if anyone, was she planning to meet? And why would a 9-year-old child, raised in such a sheltered home, walk into the night alone? The search for Asha Degree moved quickly from her home to the roadsides she had been spotted on. Every field, ditch, and stretch of grass along Highway 18 was combed with precision. The community joined hands, forming human chains to scan through the wet terrain. But it was what was found in the brush that gave investigators their first concrete clues. About a mile from her home, scattered along the roadside, lay a few of Asha's personal belongings. A hairbow, pencil, a marker, and a sheet of paper, items easily overlooked by passing drivers, but unmistakable to her parents. These weren't random objects. They belonged to Asha. The discovery gave investigators something to work with, but also deepened the mystery. It confirmed she had traveled this far. But why had she dropped these items? Had she been in distress? Or were they left as breadcrumbs? A silent trail pointing to where she was headed? The community's hope that she might simply be lost began to fade. The weather on that February morning had been harsh, cold, rainy, and windy. For a 9-year-old girl without a jacket, survival in the open seemed unlikely. Days passed and still no sign of Asha. The case quickly spread beyond Shelby, North Carolina. The FBI joined in. Posters went up across the state. Her smiling school portrait, with the neatly braided hair and innocent grin, became the face of a haunting mystery. Then came a discovery that was even more chilling. Over a year later, in August of 2001, a construction worker unearthed a plastic bag buried along Highway 18 in Burke County, about 30 miles from where Asha was last seen. Inside were children's clothes that didn't belong to her, and Asha's own backpack. The bag had been double-wrapped in black plastic, intentionally hidden, and inside the backpack were her belongings, still intact. It was the first piece of hard evidence since she vanished, and it raised new, disturbing questions. If Asha had run away, how did her backpack end up buried so far from home? Who had taken it there? And what did it mean for her fate? The discovery of Asha's buried backpack shifted the investigation into darker, more unsettling territory. What had once been seen as the story of a runaway was now leaning toward something far more sinister. Someone had taken the time to bury her belongings in a remote area, deliberately, methodically, and far from where she was last seen. Theories began to swirl, each one more troubling than the last. The first theory remained the simplest. Perhaps Asha really had run away, and along the way encountered a stranger who offered her a ride. Maybe she climbed into the wrong car, trusting a face that appeared kind in the moment, only to be taken against her will. This would explain how her backpack ended up so far from home, hidden by someone who didn't want it found. But if that were true, why had she left in the first place? Asha had no history of rebellion. She had no enemies, no secret life, no hidden troubles. Investigators found no signs of abuse at home, no evidence of bullying at school. She wasn't even old enough to have a cell phone or internet access that could connect her to strangers. Another theory suggested she may have been lured. Could someone have groomed her quietly, offering friendship or promises that sparked her imagination? A missing persons case of so young person often points to predators. Yet, when investigators searched through her school, her library habits, her family contacts, they found nothing. No suspicious adults, no letters, no secret correspondences. There was also the unsettling possibility that Asha had set out with a plan of her own. Some suggested she may have been inspired by a book she read at school, The Whipping Boy, a story about two boys who run away. It wasn't impossible that a curious 9-year-old, with a vivid imagination, might try to mirror the tale. But that theory didn't account for her belongings being buried so far away, carefully hidden by adult hands. As the years passed, new witnesses came forward. A driver reported seeing Asha near a green early 1970s model Ford Thunderbird, or possibly a Lincoln Mark IV, the morning she disappeared. The car was described as having rust along the wheel well. That sighting raised chilling questions. Had Asha willingly climbed into the car, or had she been forced inside? The FBI began treating the case as a likely abduction. Yet, without a body, without physical evidence beyond her backpack, the case grew colder with each year. The Degree family clung to hope, but the absence of answers was its own kind of torment. Even the smallest detail now carried weight. Every potential lead, every tip was treated as a chance to break open the case. But each time, investigators hit another dead end. The story of Asha Degree had grown from a local mystery into one of the most haunting unsolved child disappearances in American history. And yet, despite everything, there was still no trace of the little girl who walked into the storm and never came home. 2 decades have now passed since Asha Degree vanished into the early morning storm, and still, no one knows what truly happened to her. The little girl in the white nightdress, clutching her book bag, remains frozen in time, forever 9 years old. The Degree family never stopped searching. Harold and Aquila filled their home with photos of Asha, never letting her image fade from daily life. Every Valentine's Day, the anniversary of her disappearance, they organized walks, vigils, and public appeals. For them, hope was not optional, it was survival. Aquila often said, "If I give up, then Asha will have nobody." The FBI and Cleveland County Sheriff's Office also refused to close the case. Over the years, they pursued new leads, interviewed old witnesses, and even offered rewards for information. In 2020, the FBI renewed their appeal, releasing digital age progression images of what Asha might look like as a grown woman in her 20s. It was an attempt to make the public imagine. What if she had survived? What if she was still out there somewhere? But for all the hope, there was also unease. The discovery of her backpack, carefully buried, remained the darkest clue. Someone had tried to erase her. Someone out there knew exactly what happened. The detail of the possible green Thunderbird or Lincoln Mark IV haunted investigators. Was this the vehicle that carried Asha away from Highway 18 forever? Theories never stopped coming. Some believed she was abducted by a passing predator, someone opportunistic who buried her belongings and vanished. Others wondered if she'd been trafficked, taken far beyond the state. A few even clung to the faint possibility that she might have chosen to disappear, inspired by stories of running away, though this seemed almost impossible for a child her age. For the Degree family, none of the theories mattered. What mattered was truth, closure, and after all these years, they still don't have it. The case of Asha Degree is more than just a mystery. It is a haunting reminder of how a single moment can fracture a family forever. Asha's disappearance has been described as one of the most baffling cases in North Carolina history. No crime scene, no suspects, no body, just a stormy night, a dark road, and a 9-year-old girl who stepped into the unknown. And perhaps the most chilling detail of all is this: someone, somewhere, knows the truth. Until that person speaks or until evidence finally comes to light, the story of Asha Degree will remain exactly what it has always been. A mystery buried in shadows, where every answer leads only to more questions.